What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Daily Dime, coming off a very nice Sunday in the NFL streets over on Underdog. We talked about it a lot last week, Zach, didn't we? Where it felt like we were close to having the big wins, and then they came yesterday, not quite to the degree they could have. If only we had that one more DeAndre Hopkins reception, it would have been a massive day. But at the end of the day, when you hit for 27 units on a day, you probably shouldn't complain too much.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't, but I will for a second, right? Like, because if D-Hop can get over the line for us, I mean, we would have just absolutely cleaned up. I was out at a wedding yesterday, and it was nice to see in the early window. Really no sweat for a couple of those 3 picks coming in right off the bat. And then, I'm sitting there at the reception, let me get a single entry in for NBA and this type of stuff, and cashed everywhere that way. So it was a good Sunday and a really weird week ahead from a schedule perspective on the NBA side of things, like just the showdown tonight, and then we get into 2 quarterfinal matchups on Tuesday and Wednesday. Still not a huge slate on Thursday, so a little bit slower here, but that doesn't, we are of course diving even deeper onto these shorter slates and trying to find some spots to attack in the prop market. And I think we got a couple interesting ones here this morning.
Yeah, I know. I've got at least 2 that I really like on the NFL side. We'll see what kind of stocks props we get. That was one thing that you and I were discussing backstage too, is they do a pretty good job on the NFL side of things of giving us more extensive offerings for these island games. Hopefully they do the same thing on the NBA side, not just tonight, but the next 3 nights over in those NBA streets. So we'll see what kind of offerings we get there. So we might end up having different waves of plays throughout the day. Of course, we will be live as well, 5:30 for the Millie with myself, Two Gun, and Prop God. Some more picks then, but why don't we jump right in here?
Yeah, let's start on the NBA side again. It's just Knicks at Raptors here tonight. Knicks are 6.5-point road favorites north of the border. It's a 232 implied total here. Q tags on Karl-Anthony Towns, on Cameron Payne. Both of those guys missed last time. And if we get them out again, I mean, it's just stack your Knicks, and everybody's going to do that. So it's going to be can you get the right 4 Knicks into your lineup and then hit the right Raptor? That kind of combination in your showdowns tonight on either site. But if those guys sit, a lot of these Knicks lines are really low. So I was considering early this morning, Alex, can I find some of these Knicks lines that I think are low that would skyrocket up, relatively, if Towns gets ruled out, if Cam Payne gets ruled out? But looking at that line, man, I think Towns plays here because 6.5-point favorites on the road. So 8.5 in a neutral site, I think would be fair to say. That feels kind of like how it should be if everybody is healthy, or if Towns is in, rather. Because on the Toronto side, right, they're still missing IQ. They're still missing Bruce Brown. But you got Kelly Olynyk back, so you're solidifying the front court a little bit. So to that end, let's look at Josh Hart to start here. And I don't love this one, but if Towns plays, I think it's a really interesting option. Lower than 8.5 rebounds. And look, if Towns does not play, then I don't like this pick. But we have Towns projected in for full minutes here. And this is a pick that the model likes, especially at the 1.1x multiplier. So Hart, he's averaging right at 8.5 rebounds per game on the season, and his rebound rate's 13.4% on the season. So I wanted to look how does that look when Karl-Anthony Towns is off the floor? It's up to 15.8% in a 220-minute sample size. But Precious Achiuwa is back now, and we know in Towns' stead, Jericho Sims got the start last time out, played 6 minutes, never came back. It was Precious Achiuwa time in the front court, and so extremely small sample size, right? Just over 30 minutes with Precious this season, but he kind of ate up that Towns rebound rate right in the mid-20s and put Hart back to 14.3, I think was the number. So kind of splitting the difference in terms of his rebound rate. But we know New York does not allow a ton really across the board statistically to their opponents, but Toronto, at least on the boards, Alex, has been top. They are 10th in terms of opponent rebounds allowed. So in Josh Hart's last 4 matchups against a Jakob Poeltl team, right? Because Jakob Poeltl is the guy that's down there clearing people out on the boards on both ends of the floor and doing pretty well this season for himself. Josh Hart in his last 4 meetings against a Poeltl team under 8.5 in all 4 dating back to the start of the 2022-23 season. So this includes 2 games when Josh Hart was on Portland and Jakob Poeltl was in San Antonio, right? But 2 with the Knicks, and the minutes were not to the level where we expect them tonight to be, around 36, 37. These games, 31, 32 minutes. But, it's not a slam dunk reason or factor to make this pick. But he's under this number in 11 of 23 games this season. And the fact that we're getting the 1.1x multiplier and he's projected for a hair under 8 rebounds in the model here tonight, I'm intrigued by this, especially because of the 1.1x multiplier.
It's an interesting one. I think one of the things that you and I noted about this Toronto team is that they do turn the ball over a lot. They're a fantastic steals matchup.
Yes.
And so I think the way that I'm going to treat this one is I will probably use it if we have a stocks pick or a steals pick that we end up really liking on the New York side, where we actually draw some correlation like, hey, if the Knicks are just creating turnovers, getting steals, that means they're not getting defensive rebound opportunities on those possessions. So there actually might be like a nice hidden correlation there. And of course, if this doesn't move, if/when we get some cat in news, then I would also like it a little bit more. So I'm with you. It's like there are paths to this being a very good pick. It's also it could break in such a way where that game's tipping off, and you're like, well, I don't think this one's going to hit, so I shouldn't pay attention. So yeah. It's one of those things that on a larger slate, we're never talking about this one, but
right.
If we need that extra piece to make a 6-pick play, something like that, it's definitely in play. All right, let's jump over to the NFL side. You have anything else?
Well, I was going to say that's, again, what made me look more into that was that the model likes that pick a decent amount with that multiplier. I did want to point out we did get 2 stocks props while we were talking. So, look, shout out to Underdog. They always post them while we're live here, Monday through Friday. But just OG Anunoby and Jakob Poeltl, and, looking at these multipliers, they don't look great. I wish they gave us the option to take OG up to 3.5 because then I think we would be talking. But 0.82x, I can't go there.
Yeah, I mean he's averaging 2.6. This is a fantastic stocks matchup. He's got 7, 2, 6, and 6 in the last 4 games. So what I was actually hoping for too was as you said, give us 3.5 or give us the chance to ladder it. So let's see. Do they have steals? Because maybe we go that way. So 1.5 steals.
Yeah. Good call.
Let's see what we got there.
I'm opening up just all the stat projections here. We've got OG for 1.56 steals.
Yeah, 2.8 per game in the last 4, including back-to-back games with 4 steals.
Well, Bridges 1.34. He's projected closer to 1. Bridges averaging 1.1 steals on the year. He's had 2 in 3 of his last 5 games, so been doing well with the steals lately. But he's only over 1.5 in 7 of 23 appearances, and again, 3 of those have come in the last 5, so probably an appropriate 1.34x multiplier there. I mean, if I'm going to one of these Knicks guys, it would be OG, then Josh Hart, and I'll probably leave they're dangling that 1.3 in front of me to try to get me to take McCall Bridges, and I don't think I'm going to fall for it today.
I'm with you. It's just OG Anunoby over 1.5 steals. I think that's probably the best one we have here.
And I like that at this point in the morning better than the Josh Hart rebounds pick we were talking about, because the OG line, no matter who's in or who's out here, unless he's out, of course, but it's going to remain a fine prop that we think there's a little bit of an edge on there. Yeah,
I agree 100%. Also have 1.14x on the blocks. For context, 1.6 steals per game, 1.0 blocks per game. So we should be getting a much larger difference here. It's also a better steals matchup than it is a blocks matchup. So I think this OG over 1.5 steals is one of those plays where we'd be confident about this one, even if it was a big NBA slate. So I think that's just a really good play, a great foundation. So with that, let's go over to the NFL. Maybe we'll come back to NBA as well, but I have 2 picks that I really like. So Dallas got Micah Parsons back 4 games ago.
Yeah. And
they have just been gashed by scrambles ever since. Now, I do want to mention that is not entirely their fault. They have played Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels in that time, but they also allowed a bunch of scrambles to Drew Lock. They also allowed a bunch of scrambles to, I'm forgetting who else they played. It was another quarterback that doesn't run a whole lot. Oh, CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud, they allowed a 20-yard scramble to as well. So a lot of chunk gains, 6 explosive scrambles in the last 4 games. No other team is even over 3 in that time. They've allowed like well over 100 scramble yards in that time, and explosive scramble yards in that time, I should say. Mm-hmm. And no other team is even above like 50. So they have a very aggressive pass rush. They're second in pressure rate in that time. They're second in sack rate in that time. But quarterbacks do escape. And Joe Burrow has been escaping this year, has a bunch of more explosive scrambles than he's had in the past. And we get his longest rush at just 7.5 yards. So I like the over 9.5 rushing yards for him. I also like the over 7.5 longest rush at 1.05x. And I think I'm going to lean towards that 1.05x on the longest rush for him. So that's going to be my first pick here.
Yeah, I like that one. And getting that little extra boost on the multiplier with the 7.5 yards and the track record for the Cowboys, like you mentioned, since Micah came back, which Micah coming back has been great for my 53-man Dynasty League team that I need Micah Parsons on my D-line there. But yeah, it makes total sense. And I think getting the little extra cookie there with longest rush over just the total rushing yards makes some sense to me. What else you got?
Got Chase Brown over 26.5 receiving yards. He has been a monster in the passing game of late. Let me read you these games. In their last 4, he's got 5 receptions on 5 targets for 37 yards, 9 receptions on 11 targets for 52, 5 on 7 targets for 57, and then 3 on 3 targets for 30 yards. So 4 consecutive games, I should say, over this number. So I already like it as a base. And then Dallas has allowed the most yards on screen passes in the entire league this season. Again, that's kind of a product of their aggressive pass rush style. They want to get to the quarterback, and sometimes they don't care if that means that they get burned by a well-timed screen. They've also allowed the most yards per reception on those screen passes. So I was hoping to see that Chase Brown was kind of the like screen game magician for this team. It's actually primarily been Jamar Chase, but because he's already getting to this receiving yards number, and now you add in the great screen matchup, I think Chase Brown goes over this number fairly easily. If all of the screen passes were going to Chase Brown, I would have more interest in the, let's see, what number is it? 12.5 longest reception. But because he hasn't been the focal point of their screen game, I'm just going to stick with this 26.5 receiving yards and let any screen passes be a cherry on top of what he's already been producing in that.
I like it. Do you have any interest? Have you looked at any of the ladder opportunities there, like what they're giving us? I see the arrows.
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't really looked at it, but so, I mean, like he's been 37, 52, 57, and 30 in the last 4. So I don't think that these are bad by any means.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to give that a little bit more thought, but I'm already prepared to call this a really solid 3-pick play for tonight that we have here. And then probably add some long. In fact, let's see. This I have more interest in. The Joe Burrow longest rush, because let's take a look. In those last 4 games, Drew Lock against Dallas had a long rush of 28 yards. Let's see. We had
47-yard rush against the Giants, Burrow did.
Yeah, 40. So like we know it's there when he gets through. Jaden Daniels, a long rush of 23. CJ Stroud had a long rush of 20.
Okay.
And Jalen Hurts had a long rush. Let's see. Now, the thing with both Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts is I don't remember off the top of my head which ones were scrambles and which ones were designed runs. We can absolutely go back in Stats Hub and find that out. You just you go to advanced rushing, use the advanced filter, run concepts, and then turn scramble to true. So we can absolutely find this information if we need it, but Hurts had a long rush in that game of 24. So 4 consecutive games where they've allowed at least a 20-yard run. Burrow has been scrambling more. I like the 19.5. I also like the 29.5 here. So let's go ladder Joe Burrow, I think, instead of the receiving yards for Chase Brown because it only takes that one play. And we're getting this like huge jump in multiplier, which I think we're getting from underdog because they don't recognize what a great scramble matchup this is.
I'm with it, man. The 19.5 just got that in. Excited for that. Let's
run. In fact, I think I will probably do all 4 of these where I do 7.5, 9.5, 19.5, and 29.5. So that's going to be my plan this morning, all with the Chase Brown receiving yards and OG Anunoby steals.
Nice. I'm with it. The only other NBA prop that I'm eyeing here this morning is RJ Barrett over his 21.5 points here. Now, the model does like this one. That we've got him projected for a hair over 23.1 to be exact. So, like, again, Scotty Barnes is back. Kelly Olynyk is going to be backing up Pirtle now. So this team is getting healthier. So I think the 23.3 points per game he's averaged on the season, again, that number is buoyed a little bit by the multiple weeks he spent without Scotty Barnes, without Emmanuel Quickly. But if you go check on the 10 games that he's played with Scotty Barnes this year, he's over this number in 5 of 10. And 2 of those 5 where he missed, he was at 20 and 18 points in less than 30 minutes played in both of those. So, like, could they get run off the court by the Knicks here tonight, especially if Towns plays and you don't get to full minutes for RJ? Sure. But the track record with Scotty Barnes definitely doesn't take you off of this number. And if you need any extra, again, an extra little push from behind to take the leap on over 21.5 points, Narrative Street, like going up against the Knicks. This is the second time that he's seen the Knicks, but the first time in Toronto. And I think he put up 15 shots in like the 28 minutes he had in that, I believe it was a blowout loss last year. But I don't know. I'm pretty encouraged by this. Again, on a day where we don't have a ton that we absolutely love, this is probably my second favorite behind the OG prop that we already had in there. So if I can round robin this in with the other 3 picks we had, I'm probably going to do that here early this morning because, again, RJ, not on the injury report. He's going to go out there. He's going to be chucking against this team. It's not a good individual matchup, but I think the shot volume will be there. And the model agrees, right? Having him just a bit over 23 points.
Yeah, I like this one too. I think the way that I will play this instead of round robining it, I like the OG steals quite a bit more, but I do like this one enough such that if I find like I'm toying with some Jake Ferguson stuff on the NFL side. If I find that if we end up liking the Josh Hart under on rebounds a little bit more, I'm 100% using this RJ Barrett over on his points to make a 6-pick play later on in the day. So that's how I'm going to do it. Any showdown thoughts before we jump off? Obviously, a little bit of a quicker show than usual with one NFL game, one NBA game.
Yeah, I have a couple. I did Shazam's in here, and he's asking about the Turpin longest reception, which was a great dessert on our Thanksgiving evening. But so any thoughts here, or is that something you maybe will look into as the day goes on?
I was looking at this earlier. So the first concern is that Cincinnati doesn't play anywhere near the amount of single high that New York plays. And that's where Turpin has really been effective. And when we think about single high, usually we think about those plays downfield, down the sideline where the safety can't get there in time. And that's why you're getting some explosive passes. But we also get explosive passes against single high the way that Turpin did last week on those screen passes where safety's down in the middle of the field. You've got extra bodies in the middle. So what do you do instead? You throw it out wide, and now you have a numbers advantage out there. So that I think is troublesome for Turpin. The other thing is like he had an awesome game and it seemed like he was on the field and super involved. He only ran 10 routes. So he was crazy involved, which I think we hypothesized because of that matchup with New York. So I don't think we want to overreact to how involved he was here in this matchup. So I was looking at it. I need to look a little bit more how Cincinnati has done against screen passes. I think that has been I think that's going to be a key because so many of those touches for him aren't the downfield shots. It is those screen passes, just saying this guy's so dynamic with the ball in his hands. We got to get him the ball. I like the point that AJ's making here that since he has struggled with slot speed and some of Turpin's big plays have come out of the slot. So that's another thing I want to check, like exactly how many of his explosive plays have come out of the slot relative to to out wide. So lots to look at here, and certainly something I'm going to want to look at more. My lean is that the base longest reception went up from like 6.5 to 10.5. So they already reacted to the production last week. We know how much better that matchup was on that Thanksgiving than it is this week. So I'm leaning against, but it's one I want to look at more, because especially if we find value on those multipliers again, like that's such a cheat code for those huge days.
Yeah. Well, it makes me sad here just to get the totally not connected, or maybe a little connected here, but the parentheses, Mike Hilton is getting old. Alex, that Steelers signed football over my left shoulder is a Mike Hilton signed football. I love Mike Hilton.
There you go.
He is getting old. It feels like every other week I see this man getting just absolutely burned on a highlight. But let's talk about the DFS side of things before we shut it down here on Monday. On DraftKings, of course, the Towns news, the campaign news is going to have huge implications on the slate as a whole, with it being a showdown, but just how many Knicks you have to stack into your lineups. That number is it's definitely 3 with how concentrated their rotation is. But if you lose one or both of those guys, we saw what they did last time out, really running that 6-man rotation. That's an antique now. Yeah, I love myself some Mike Hilton, man. But no matter how that injury report breaks, Alex, you can play almost whoever you want on this slate. Even throwing Scotty Barnes in there for $17K and some change in the captain spot, you've got Davion Mitchell at 2,800, right? If this game blows out and you're MMEing in GPPs, Jamal Shed is the minimum at 1,000, right? Jamison Battle played, I think, got 4 minutes last time out, probably projecting him for 2 minutes, but he's 1,200. Jericho Sims, 1,600 if Towns is out and he gets the start again. If Campaign is active, 3,200, right? Jacoby Walter going to play probably mid to high teens in minutes. He's 3,400, right? So you get the picture here. Miles McBride, 4,400. We have plenty of value. These guys that are going to play, 15 to 25 minutes. And OG Anunoby, 7,600. McCall Bridges, 7,400, right? Josh Hart, 8,400. These guys are not overly expensive for projecting for 36, 37, 38 minutes. And if Towns is out, you can count on those guys playing closer to 40. So right now, my favorite captain would probably be Towns if he plays, and depending on the timing, because he's got that big red Q tag there. So if that news comes out 30 minutes before lock, that probably becomes my favorite captain. But I do like Scotty Barnes right now just for what he's been doing. Really matchup agnostic over the last couple weeks, even getting back alongside RJ Barrett, Jacoby Walter, Grady Dick coming back in, all these guys. Scotty Barnes is contributing across the box score. The price for the captain spot is not super prohibitive. So spending up is the way I would go right now in just one lineup. If you get Towns out, man, I'll probably roll Josh Hart there.
Yeah, I like this call. A couple things here I want to note. First, we won't have ownership projections for showdowns. Anytime we get a 2-game slate or more in NBA, we will have ownership projections. But you can still find all of the projections instead of on the ownership page here at ftnfantasy.com/NBA/projections. You can get this any day, by the way. So that's the page that I'm currently on here. I too think Towns is the best captain. And I think when you look at the pricing, his fantasy points per game just really stands out. He's not priced correctly given where everybody else is. There also isn't enough separation between he and the rest of let's call them secondary players in this game. So I think he is the best captain, but if he's out, I think you can also go to OG Anunoby. And I haven't messed with too many of the actual lineup constructions, but if going to OG Anunoby as your captain opens up an extra, let's say, stud spot, or it means that you don't have to make an ugly punt, I think OG is also a viable captain here, in large part because of how much stock upside he has in this one. That stock upside obviously can be the cheat code to getting a guy to his ceiling, as we have seen of late with OG Anunoby. 48.5 DK points against Charlotte with 6 stocks against Detroit, getting him to 36.5. And then only 28 total fantasy points against New Orleans a few games ago, where he had 7 stocks. But if you get 28 fantasy points with 7 points on 2 of 10 shooting, you know that the floor and the ceiling is quite good. So I think OG also makes sense as a captain.
Yeah, I'm with it. And like just clicking around last night and while we're live here, just different builds. Like if you go a little bit cheaper with that captain pick, no matter who you've got in right now, Davion Mitchell at 2,800, I imagine he would, like if the slate started in 5 minutes, he would probably be one of the highest owned players because of what he opens up for you at 2,800, right? He stinks, but he's priced like that. And you're just not going to get another guy on the slate priced sub 3K that's projects right now to play 25 plus minutes. So that opens up a ton. And so maybe, again, if you're thinking, if nothing changes here, maybe you're fading a guy like Davion Mitchell, you're fading one of those higher priced guys and loading up on the 7 and 8K range, the Knicks wings that you mentioned, your RJ Barrett, guys like that.
Yep, agree completely. All right, let's review this 3-pick play real quick, and then we will jump out of here. So as of now, the 3-pick play, Joe Burrow over 7.5 longest rush. We can ladder that to any of these other numbers. That's what I will be doing. Chase Brown over 26.5 receiving yards, and OG Anunoby over 1.5 steals. And then we can also mix in RJ Barrett over 21.5 points, and potentially some Josh Hart stuff, potentially some Jake Ferguson stuff. So I will go ahead and post these in the tracker and in Discord as soon as possible. Any closing thoughts before we jump off here, Zach?
Yeah, looking ahead to tomorrow and Wednesday, those quarterfinal matchups in the NBA Cup knockout rounds. Again, those are the only games we're going to have over the next 2 days. So when those lines start to pop later this evening and into tonight, consider that some of these teams haven't been running playoff type rotations, even in their group stage games. There's really no excuse not to now that you're in the knockout rounds. Like, hey, like these games, at least the first one, going to count towards the regular season record. And we're 3 wins away from getting everybody on the team an extra $500,000. Like, I expect to see these rotations tighten. These sites, underdog prize picks, right? They're not ignorant of this idea, but I think you may be able to find some spots. And so that's where I'm going to be looking at late tonight, because I think we could see some lines posted tonight that shift dramatically by the time we reconvene on Tuesday morning. So if I find anything crazy, I'm going to tag that Pick'em Games channel here so all our subscribers will know.
That's an awesome point, and there's a good chance we get those before the NFL game kicks off too. So might have a chance to get some 6-pick plays in, full of picks that we actually have conviction on, and not grabbing 1 or 2 that's like I don't love this one, but it's worth doing to get ourselves to a 6-pick. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that. Well, like I said earlier, we'll probably have a couple waves of picks loading in with the first one going in very shortly. All right, guys, appreciate you turning in. We will catch you at 5:30 for the Millie this evening. Goodbye.